They say the Appalachian Mountains are older than bones, older than language, older than the light that first touched them. People around here will tell you that the mountains remember things, that every ridge, every hollow, every whisper of wind carries something ancient inside it tonight. I have 10 true encounters from the deep Appalachia, stories told by those who swore they'd never go back. Because when the forest watches you in silence, it's not always animals waiting behind those trees, and what you're about to hear might just make you afraid to ever drive through those roads again. So, sit back, turn down the lights, and listen closely, because the mountains have stories to tell. And tonight, they've chosen you. The first story comes from a man named Travis Cole, a long-haul trucker who'd been driving through eastern Kentucky for over 20 years. He thought he knew every mile of those roads, every gas stop, every turn through the Appalachian back roads, until the night he took the wrong detour near a place locals call Devil's Backbone Ridge. It was late October, mist hanging low, the road twisting between endless walls of trees. His headlights caught nothing but fog and darkness. The GPS signal dropped. No phone service, just the sound of his tires humming against wet asphalt. He figured he'd keep driving until he found a junction, but the deeper he went, the stranger it got. The fog grew thicker, too thick. It was like driving through milk. Then his headlights hit something ahead. A figure standing in the road, a man tall and thin, wearing overalls and a hat pulled low. Travis slammed the brakes, tires squealing, but the man didn't move. He just stood there, one hand raised as if signaling him to stop. Travis rolled down the window a few inches and shouted, "You all right out there?" No answer. Then, slowly, the man lifted his head, and Travis saw that his face wasn't right. His mouth was stitched shut, crude black stitches pulling the skin tight. Travis threw the truck in reverse, heart pounding, but before he could hit the gas, the figure moved, not walking, sliding, like his feet didn't touch the ground. Travis floored it, tires spinning, the trailer swaying as he backed up onto the wet shoulder. The fog swallowed the figure instantly. He tore down the road, adrenaline shaking his hands. A mile later, he found a narrow dirt path and took it, desperate to get out. But the moment he turned, the fog cleared, and his headlights lit up something worse. A dozen wooden crosses lined the road, each one hand-carved, names etched deep into the wood, and every name was dated October 31st. He slowed down, counting 1, 2, 3, 12 crosses. The 13th one had no name, only a single word carved in shaky letters: driver. He stared at it, frozen. Then the CB radio on his dash crackled to life, static at first, then a voice. "Don't stop this time, Travis." He slammed his hand against the power switch, cutting it off. But the voice came again, louder, clearer, through the truck's speakers even though the radio was off. "Keep driving, Travis. You stopped last time. Don't stop again." He looked around the cab. His blood ran cold. Someone had written something on the inside of his windshield. Fog letters forming right before his eyes. It read, "Turn around." But before he could even react, the engine died. Total silence. Then, faintly, scratching from the back of his trailer. Slow, steady, rhythmic scratching, like nails dragging against metal. He climbed out of the cab, flashlight trembling in his hand. When he reached the back doors, he froze. The locks were already open. He hadn't touched them. The doors creaked open an inch, then two. Inside was pitch black. He called out, "Hello?" No sound. Then something small rolled out. A jar, a mason jar, old and dirty. Inside was murky water, and floating in it was a human tooth. Travis dropped it and ran. He jumped back into the cab, turned the key again and again, until the engine roared to life. He didn't stop. He drove until dawn, until the fog finally broke, and the road rejoined the main highway. When he pulled into a gas station hours later, the attendant looked pale when Travis told him where he'd come from. The man just shook his head slowly. "Ain't no road out that way no more. Got washed out years ago." "You sure you weren't dreaming, mister?" Travis didn't answer, but when he got out to refuel, he saw something that made his legs buckle. On the back of his trailer, in the layer of dirt and road dust, were 13 handprints, small, pressed deep, smeared down like something had been hanging on for miles, and written beneath them, in long, dripping streaks, were the same 2 words: "Turn around." He sold his truck 2 weeks later, never drove again. Locals still say that on foggy October nights along that stretch of highway, you can hear the sound of a rig idling somewhere deep in the trees. And if you listen close enough, the radio still crackles with a voice whispering one last warning: "Don't stop this time, Travis." The sound came first, not thunder, not wind, but something deeper, a vibration that made the earth hum underfoot. Mara Jennings had heard about Hawks Hollow before. It was a part of the Appalachian Trail few hikers dared to explore. Locals said compasses failed there, that you could walk in circles for hours, following your own footprints until dark came and the forest changed around you. But Mara was no tourist. She was a seasoned hiker, tough and stubborn. She liked to prove myths wrong. So when she found an old handwritten map at a flea market in Boone that marked Hawks Hollow with a single red X, she packed her gear and set out to find it. The first day went fine. The forest was quiet, peaceful. The air was crisp with autumn. By sunset, she set up camp near a stream, built a fire, and laughed to herself. "Just another story to tell," she said aloud, "but the forest never laughs back. It listens." By midnight, the fire was low and the woods had gone still. No crickets, no owls, not even wind. That was when she heard it, the low vibration again, somewhere deep underground, like something massive was moving below. She shined her flashlight around the trees. Nothing. Just mist creeping between the trunks, then a faint sound snapping twigs. Footsteps. "Hello?" She called out. "Who's there?" No answer. The beam of her flashlight cut through the fog, and that was when she saw it. A light in the distance, faint, yellow, flickering. A cabin. It was not on her map. She thought maybe it was an old ranger's outpost or another camper, so she followed the light. As she walked, she noticed something strange. The sound of her footsteps came back to her half a beat late, like an echo that did not belong to her. When she reached the clearing, the cabin stood crooked and half collapsed, moss covering the roof, door hanging off the hinges. The light came from inside, a lantern on a wooden table. She stepped in cautiously. The air smelled of damp wood and rot. The table was set for one. A bowl, a spoon, and beside it a single human tooth. Her stomach twisted, then the floor creaked behind her. Mara spun around. The doorway was empty, fog curling in. She stepped backward slowly, her flashlight trembling in her hand. A whisper came from the dark. "You should not have come here." It was not angry. It was sad. She froze, every instinct screaming to run. But when she turned, the door was gone. In its place, solid wall. Her breath came fast. The windows, too, sealed. No seams. No escape. She lifted the lantern, shining it across the cabin. There, in the corner, a small wooden chest sat half buried in dust. She knelt down and opened it. Inside were photographs, old, black and white, curled at the edges. Each one showed people standing in front of the same cabin. 10 faces, families, couples, children. But every photo had the same thing in common. The eyes were blacked out with ink, and in the last photo she saw herself. Same red jacket, same backpack, standing right in front of that same cabin. She dropped the photo, heart pounding. That was when the whisper came again. You should not have opened the chest. The lantern flickered. The air grew heavy, pressing against her chest. The walls groaned like wood under weight. Something moved under the floorboards, slow, deliberate. The vibration came back stronger this time. She backed up against the wall, eyes darting. The boards beneath her boots shifted, bulged. And then fingers broke through, grey, skeletal fingers clawing their way up from the ground, dragging something with them. Mara screamed and stumbled toward the back of the room, slamming her shoulder against the wood. A voice whispered close to her ear, though no one stood near. "Stay still. It cannot see you if you do not move." Her breath hitched. The thing rose higher, its shape half hidden in shadow. She saw the outline of a head, long and twisted, hair hanging in clumps like wet moss. It stopped, sniffed the air, and turned toward her. She stayed still, heart slamming so loud she thought it would give her away. Then it spoke in a broken, rasping voice. "You took the light." It reached for the lantern. Its fingers brushed the flame, and the room went dark. Mara bolted. She slammed into the wall where the door had been, and this time it gave way. She burst out into the cold night, stumbling through the trees. She ran until her lungs burned, not daring to look back. When she finally stopped, she saw light again, this time from her campfire. She gasped in relief. She had made it back, except her tent was gone. Her gear was gone. The fire was gone. She was standing in front of the same cabin again. The lantern was glowing inside, waiting for her. She screamed and turned away, running blindly into the woods. Branches tore her face. Roots clawed her boots, but she did not stop. Not until dawn painted the horizon red. She stumbled onto a dirt road and collapsed, sobbing. A farmer found her hours later, trembling and barefoot. When he asked what had happened, she told him everything. He listened silently, then said, "That cabin burned down in 1957, killed a woman named Mara Jennings. You must have seen her ghost." She stared at him in disbelief. "I am Mara Jennings," she whispered. The man's face went pale. He reached slowly into his truck, pulled out a newspaper clipping and handed it to her. There it was. Her name, her face, the same red jacket. Hiker found dead near Hawks Hollow, 1957. The paper was old, yellowed, brittle. When she looked up again, the man was gone. The truck too, just empty road and morning fog. The clipping fluttered in her hands, then crumbled to dust, and far off, somewhere deep in the trees, a lantern flickered once and went out. Locals say that if you camp near Hawks Hollow, you can still hear Mara's footsteps at night, circling your tent. And sometimes, when the fog rolls low and thick, you might see her lantern glowing between the trees. But if you do not look directly at it, because if you do, the forest might remember your name too. It began with a scream that did not sound human, not the kind born from fear, but from something else, something older, something broken. Caleb Monroe had heard tales about Black Elk Ridge his entire life. Every old-timer in McDowell County had their version of the same warning. Never hike past the 3rd mile marker after sunset. The mountain remembers what it buries. He always thought it was just folklore meant to keep kids out of danger. But when a group of urban explorers offered him cash to guide them through the ridge for a Halloween video, he said yes. He needed the money. He needed to believe the stories were only that, stories. They started their hike late in the day, the forest already steeped in shadow. The explorers carried cameras, LED lights, and way too much confidence. Caleb walked ahead, the only one without a lens pointed at his face. He warned them to stay close. They joked instead. By the time they reached the 3rd mile marker, the air had changed. The woods grew still. Even the wind refused to move. That was when they heard it, the first scream. It came from deep in the hollow below them, a long wail that started low and climbed into a shriek so sharp it cut the silence in half. Everyone froze. What was that? One of the explorers whispered. Coyote, Caleb lied. But even he did not believe it. They pressed on, curiosity outweighing fear. But the deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. The trees leaned inward like they were listening. The ground was soft, spongy, as if something moved just beneath the soil. The second scream came closer, louder. This one was followed by the sound of dragging, something heavy being pulled through the leaves. They turned on their lights, scanning the woods. Nothing. Then Caleb noticed something half buried in the dirt ahead. A set of bones, not animal, human. The explorers crowded around, cameras clicking. One of them, a guy named Devin, reached down and brushed the dirt away. Man, this is insane footage, he said, grinning. Caleb's gut turned cold. He saw markings etched into the bones, symbols carved deep into the surface, circles and lines that reminded him of old coal miners' warnings. Put that back, Caleb said sharply. Now Devin laughed. Relax, it's just bones. They've been here forever. That was when the third scream came, so close it rattled the trees. The air around them trembled. Something moved in the dark beyond the lights, tall and fast. The trees seemed to bend around it as it passed. Did you see that? One of the girls gasped. Devin pointed the camera into the dark. The night vision flickered and caught something for a single second. A figure, gaunt, pale, its mouth open impossibly wide, stretching down to its chest. Then the feed cut to static. The sound returned, scraping, dragging, whispering. The forest filled with it. Caleb grabbed Devin's shoulder. We're leaving, now. But when he turned to lead the way back, the trail was gone. The markers, the rope, everything gone. Only endless trees and fog. Panic rippled through the group. They ran, tripping over roots and rocks until they stumbled into a clearing. At the center stood a mine shaft entrance, collapsed and half buried in vines. Old warning signs hung crooked. Danger, do not enter. Devin laughed nervously. Maybe that's where it's coming from. Before Caleb could stop him, he ducked inside, camera light bouncing off the stone. The others hesitated, torn between following or fleeing. Then another scream, this one from inside the shaft. Caleb rushed forward, flashlight shaking. Devin! He reached the entrance and froze. The air smelled metallic, heavy with decay. The walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges where fingernails had torn through rock. Something glistened deeper inside. Devin's camera lay on the ground, still recording. He picked it up. On the screen, Devin's face stared back, eyes wide, mouth open, trembling. He whispered into the lens, "It's behind me." Then something long and thin pulled him backward into the dark, and the feed cut. Caleb backed away slowly. The sound of footsteps echoed from the shaft, light, uneven, dragging. The explorers screamed and scattered, their lights flashing wildly. Caleb turned to run but felt something brush against his leg, a cold, bony hand. He stumbled, fell hard and rolled over. A figure crawled out from the shaft, body twisted, skin stretched thin over bone. Its eyes were sunken, mouth unhinged, a hollow scream still pouring out even though no air passed its lips. It moved toward him, its limbs bending in wrong directions, fingers clawing the dirt. Caleb scrambled back, kicking, shouting for the others. But they were gone, only fading cries in the distance. The thing stopped, tilting its head. Then it spoke not with words, but with sound. It repeated his own voice perfectly. Caleb. His name echoed through the woods, his own tone thrown back at him like mockery. He froze, and that was all it needed. The creature lunged, mouth stretching wide enough to swallow his scream. Everything went black. When the sun rose, a rescue team found the campsite abandoned. The cameras were scattered. The footage was corrupt except for one still frame, Devon's camera pointing at the collapsed shaft. In the background, behind the shadows, a pale face peered out, eyes black, mouth wide open. Locals still hear the screams near Black Elk Ridge. Sometimes it sounds like a woman, sometimes a child, and sometimes it sounds like your own voice calling your name. If you ever hike past the 3rd mile marker and the woods fall silent, do not stop. Do not look back. It started with footsteps, not from behind but from beneath the bridge, every night. When the fog rolled over Coldwater Creek, someone, or something, walked under the old bridge even though there was nothing below but water. Sarah had grown up hearing the stories. How truckers saw figures moving under their headlights. How kids dared each other to stop their cars at midnight and turn off their engines. How the unlucky ones claimed they heard whispers right under the bridge, like voices coming through the water. She never believed any of it, until the night she had no choice but to cross that bridge alone. The town of Beach Hollow sat at the edge of the Appalachian foothills, and Coldwater Bridge was its only way out. That Halloween night, the air was thick with mist, and the old wooden bridge creaked with every gust of wind. Sarah was heading home from her night shift at the diner, past midnight, headlights cutting through the fog like blades. Halfway across, her radio began to crackle. The static wasn't from a station. It was too rhythmic, like breathing. She turned the knob, frowning. The static deepened into something that almost sounded like a voice. "Help me." Her fingers froze on the dial. She leaned forward, heart thudding. "What the hell?" The voice came again, louder this time, clearer. Under here, her blood turned cold. She slammed the radio off and hit the gas. The car lurched forward, but then something moved in her headlights. A figure, standing right in the middle of the bridge. She hit the brakes so hard the tires screamed. The figure didn't flinch. It was tall, soaking wet, its head tilted just enough for her to see the shape of a mouth, open and unmoving. Sarah blinked once. The figure was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving under her car. The bridge moaned with each step. She gripped the wheel, too afraid to look in the mirrors. The sound grew louder until it felt like it was right beneath her seat. Her phone buzzed suddenly, lighting up with a call. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered with a shaking voice. "Hello?" A faint, watery whisper echoed through the speaker. "You stopped. Why did you stop?" She dropped the phone. It slid under the seat, still glowing faintly, the voice continuing to murmur. Her instincts screamed at her to leave. She pressed her foot on the pedal and the car wouldn't move. It was like the wheels were locked in place. Then the temperature dropped. Her breath fogged up the windshield. From the corner of her eye, she saw something reach over the railing, pale fingers dripping water, clutching the edge of the bridge. Another hand followed, then a face. The figure began to pull itself up inch by inch. Its eyes were hollow, its mouth stretched open like a wound. Water streamed from its skin, pooling under the car. Sarah screamed and hit the gas again. The tires spun, squealing on the wet boards. Then, with a sudden lurch, the car broke free. She sped across the bridge, not daring to look back until she reached the other side. When she did, the bridge behind her was empty. Silent. She didn't go home. She drove straight to the sheriff's station, shaking, breathless, trying to explain. But when the deputies checked the bridge, they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone climbing up, Only one thing stood out, wet handprints along the railing, stretching the entire length of the bridge. The sheriff said it was probably a prank, maybe some drifter messing with her. But Sarah knew what she saw. For the next few nights, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that voice again. "Under here." Then, 3 days later, another car went missing. An old couple on their way back from church never made it home. Their vehicle was found at the far end of Coldwater Bridge. Headlights still on, doors open, but no one inside. The seats were soaked. The radio played nothing but static. The sheriff blocked off the road, but locals said the sounds never stopped. On foggy nights, you could still hear the footsteps under the bridge. And if you stood close enough, you could see wet footprints leading from one end to the other, never stopping, never fading. Sarah tried to move on. She switched jobs, avoided that road, and convinced herself that it was over. Until one evening, almost a year later, she was driving home through the back roads near the mountains when her car radio flickered on by itself. Static. Then a voice. "Help me, it's cold down here." Her stomach dropped. She looked at the road sign ahead. Coldwater Bridge, 1 mile. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She didn't answer. But the ringing didn't stop. It grew louder until it drowned out the engine. When she finally slammed on the brakes, the headlights illuminated something ahead. The same figure, standing in the middle of the road. This time it was closer. Its soaked hair hung over its face, skin pale and bloated, eyes completely gone. The voice came not from the radio, but from inside the car. "Why did you leave me?" The back seat creaked. Water dripped onto her shoulder. She turned slowly, her breath catching. Nothing. When she looked forward again, the road was empty. Her phone buzzed once more. A new voicemail. She hesitated, then pressed play. At first, there was only the sound of running water. Then came a faint whisper, "Come back under here." A scream followed. Her own. The next morning, a jogger found Sarah's car parked halfway across Coldwater Bridge. The engine was running, headlights glowing through the fog. No sign of Sarah. Just 2 sets of wet footprints leading over the railing, and none coming back. Locals say the bridge takes someone every October now. Always after midnight. Always when the fog is thick enough to hide what waits below. And if you ever stop on that bridge and hear footsteps under your car, whatever you do, don't look over the edge, because if you see it, it will see you too. It was not the wind that whispered that night. It was the trees. Derek Haynes had been hiking the Pine Needle Trail for years, ever since his father taught him how to navigate by moss and moonlight. The trail wound deep through the Appalachian Mountains, cutting past forgotten coal towns and creeks so quiet you could hear your heartbeat. He thought he knew every inch of it. But there was one section he had never dared to enter, the hollow beyond mile marker 12. Locals said it was cursed, that men who went down there came back wrong, if they came back at all. He had always laughed it off, until the night he decided to prove them wrong. Halloween weekend. The forest was drenched in fog. Derek strapped on his backpack, started his camera, and hiked toward mile marker 12. He wanted proof, footage he could upload, something to mock the old mountain myths. The deeper he went, the quieter it got. Not even the crickets dared to sing. The fog clung to the ground like a second skin, wrapping around his legs as he walked. When he reached the old wooden sign for mile 12, it looked different than he remembered. Someone or something had carved faces into it, dozens of them, hollow-eyed, wide-mouthed, each one screaming. He turned his camera toward it and whispered, "Guess this is where the ghosts start, huh?" But when he looked back at the playback screen, he saw something he hadn't seen with his own eyes. Behind him in the fog stood a figure motionless, watching. He spun around. Nothing there. Just fog and trees. A nervous laugh escaped him. Good one, Forrest. He pushed forward, his boots sinking into soft mud. But the fog thickened, swallowing his light. The trees began to look strange, too thin, their bark stretched tight like skin. Then the whisper came. Derek. He froze. It sounded close, just behind his ear. He turned slowly, scanning with the flashlight. Who's there? The light caught movement, a shadow slipping between the trees faster than it should have been. All right, he muttered, forcing a grin. Not funny. He started walking faster, but the voice came again. Closer. Derek, you made it. The air grew colder. His breath came out in sharp clouds. Then he noticed something strange. The fog was forming shapes, faces, dozens of them floating just beyond the light, mouths open in silent screams. The forest around him seemed to breathe. Every exhale pushed the fog closer. Every inhale drew it back. And then he saw the cabin. It stood at the base of a slope, half rotten and sunken into the mud, its roof caved in. A single lantern flickered in the window, though no one had lived there for decades. He approached slowly, camera still rolling. The closer he got, the louder the whispering became. It wasn't one voice anymore, it was many, hundreds. They murmured his name again and again, a chorus of broken throats. He reached the porch and peered inside. The lantern burned without a flame, and the walls were covered in the same carved faces from the mile marker, some small, some stretching from floor to ceiling, each one distorted in terror. Something inside the cabin moved, a faint shuffle, then another. Derek raised his flashlight and saw a figure standing in the far corner. It faced the wall, head tilted down. The skin on its arms was pale, almost translucent. "Hey," he called, trying to sound brave. "You all right?" The figure didn't move. He stepped closer, heart pounding. "Hey man, are you?" The head turned, slowly, too slowly. The face was hollow. No eyes, no mouth. Just smooth skin where features should have been. Then impossibly, a mouth began to open. The skin tore soundlessly, splitting into a perfect oval of blackness. The whispering stopped. Derek stumbled backward, tripping over a loose board. The thing moved, its head jerking unnaturally, like a puppet learning how to walk. It reached for him, fingers too long, too thin. He bolted from the cabin, crashing through the fog. Branches clawed his face, roots grabbed at his boots. He didn't stop until he hit the clearing near the creek. He gasped for air. Bending over, trembling, then he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, wet, dragging, he spun around, flashlight shaking, nothing. But when he looked down, his own shadow wasn't alone. Another stretched beside it, longer and thinner. He turned off the flashlight. The shadow stayed. It whispered his name again. Not from the air, from inside his head. He ran. He didn't care about the trail anymore, just needed to get out. But no matter how far he went, he never reached the road. The fog only grew thicker, the trees twisting into shapes that looked almost human. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't work right anymore. His flashlight died, and the darkness pressed in. That was when he heard the laughter, dozens of voices echoing from the trees. Each one sounded like him. He screamed and ran until his legs gave out. He collapsed in the mud, shaking, whispering, "Please, I just want to go home." And from the darkness a voice answered, soft and calm, "You are home." When the search party found his camera 3 days later, it was wedged in the roots of an oak near mile marker 12. The footage showed Derek running, panting, whispering his own name in panic. But in the last few seconds, something else appeared on screen, a dozen figures stepping from the fog. All of them had his face, but their eyes were hollow. They surrounded the camera. One leaned in close. It smiled without a mouth. Then the video ended. Locals say the fog on Pine Needle Trail never clears now. Hikers claim they hear their names whispered from nowhere, see shapes watching from the mist. It began with a scream that no one wanted to believe was real. On a fog-drenched night, deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, a man named Jacob Murren parked his old Chevy by the edge of Black Hollow Bridge, a narrow, decaying structure that crossed a creek so dark it looked bottomless. He was a trucker on his way through the mountains, the kind of man who didn't scare easy, but even he felt something was wrong when he stepped out, and the night fell completely silent. No crickets, no owls, not even the hum of the creek below. He'd heard stories about this bridge, stories of people who heard whispers coming from the water, of hands reaching up from beneath the surface. Locals said something old lived there, something that didn't die when the towns above it did. Jacob only stopped because he thought he saw someone. A figure had stood at the far end of the bridge, just barely visible in his headlights. A woman in a long white dress, barefoot, hair dripping wet. She looked lost, shivering in the cold. Jacob grabbed his flashlight. "You all right, ma'am?" She didn't answer. She just turned her head, slowly, too slowly, to look at him. Her face was pale and blurred by the fog, but what he saw made his breath freeze. Her mouth was open as if screaming, but no sound came out. Then she was gone, just gone. He stepped onto the bridge, the boards groaning beneath his boots. The air smelled like rot and wet earth. He swept the flashlight beam from side to side, but it only reached a few feet before being swallowed by mist. "Hello?" His voice echoed faintly. The beam landed on something glinting in the center of the bridge, a locket, small and silver, lying beside a wet footprint. He bent to pick it up, and when he flipped it open, his stomach twisted. Inside was a photograph of a little girl, maybe 8 years old, smiling between a man and woman, but the faces had been scratched out, gouged deep into the metal as if someone wanted them erased from existence. He shut the locket and looked up, and froze. Now there were more footprints. They trailed across the bridge, small and bare, soaked through with water that glistened like oil under the beam, and they were leading toward him. He stumbled backward, shining the light toward the other end, but no one was there. The air felt thick, heavy, almost breathing. Then something splashed below the bridge. He leaned over the edge, the beam shaking. The water below rippled as if something enormous had just sunk beneath the surface. Then slowly a shape began to rise. At first it looked like a person, then like several people tangled together. Pale limbs twisting, merging, disappearing beneath the surface before he could focus. Then he heard the voice, a whisper rising from the water. Jacob, his own name. Drawn out, wet and broken, he stepped back, shaking his head. "No, no, no, no," the whisper came again, louder this time. "Jacob, you forgot us." Something grabbed his ankle. Cold fingers, slick and strong, clamped around him and yanked. He screamed, kicking, dropping the flashlight as it tumbled over the edge and vanished into the water below. He hit the boards hard, clawing at the wood as the unseen thing tried to drag him down through the cracks. He kicked free, gasping, and scrambled toward his truck. But just before he reached it, a sound stopped him cold, a child's laughter. Soft, echoing, coming from behind him. He turned, and there, standing in the middle of the bridge, was a little girl. Barefoot, dripping wet, her hair hanging in her face. "Daddy," she whispered. Jacob's blood ran cold. He didn't have a daughter, but the locket, her picture, the same girl, the one smiling in the photo. He backed away. "You stay back." Her head tilted, water dripping from her chin. "You left us there." Then the sound changed. The laughter warped, deepened, turned into something inhuman. The girl's body began to twitch, her arms twisting at impossible angles. Her jaw opened wider and wider until it cracked, splitting her face in two. Jacob screamed and ran for the truck, slamming the door shut and flooring the gas pedal. Tires spun on wet gravel before catching. He drove hard, heart pounding, not daring to look back. But the rearview mirror betrayed him. The girl, no, the thing was running behind him, hands dragging on the road, body jerking like a puppet. Her reflection flickered in the mirror, closer every second, even though she wasn't moving naturally. He didn't stop until he reached the next town. When he told the sheriff what happened, the man just stared at him. "You saw her," the sheriff said quietly. "The Hollow Bride." The story came spilling out. 50 years ago, a flood had wiped out the mining town below that bridge. A family was caught in the water, a man, his wife, and their little girl. When rescuers found the wreckage, the bodies were gone. But sometimes when the fog rolls in thick and the water rises, they said the drowned ones came back, still searching for whoever left them behind. Jacob swore he'd never go near that bridge again. But 3 nights later, a trucker passing through the area called it in. A vehicle sitting abandoned at the side of Black Hollow Bridge. Engine still running, driver's door open. The sheriff found the truck empty. No sign of Jacob. The only thing left was a set of wet footprints leading out onto the bridge, and a single silver locket lying in the middle of it. He picked it up and flipped it open. The faces inside were gone again, but now there was a new one scratched in beside them. Jacob's. And though no one has seen him since, travelers still say if you stop on Black Hollow Bridge on a foggy night, you'll see a man standing at the edge, flashlight in hand, staring into the water. He'll turn toward you with hollow eyes and ask, "Have you seen my daughter?" Then the creek goes silent again, because the thing beneath the bridge has claimed another voice to whisper with. It began with a knock that echoed through the woods when no one was there to make it. 3 hikers, Lena, Travis, and Mark, were cutting through a remote stretch of the Appalachian Mountains near the border of Kentucky and West Virginia. It was late October, the air sharp and damp, fog rolling through the trees like slow-moving ghosts. They had planned a weekend trip to escape the noise of the city, but by nightfall they were hopelessly lost. Their GPS had died hours ago, their phones had no signal, and every path they took seemed to lead them back to the same clearing. That was when they heard it, the knock. 3 slow, deliberate thuds, like someone rapping on wood just beyond the tree line. They froze. Travis turned with his flashlight. "Probably a branch," he said, forcing a laugh. But his voice shook. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Only this time it was closer. Lena whispered, "What if someone's out there?" "Who'd be out here in this fog?" Mark muttered, but even he couldn't hide the unease in his tone. They decided to set up camp right there, too tired to keep searching. As they built a small fire, the fog thickened until the trees disappeared entirely. It was like sitting in a world of smoke. Then Travis noticed something through the haze, a shape, a cabin. It stood a few hundred feet away, tucked behind the veil of fog. It hadn't been there earlier. At least they hadn't seen it. Its roof sagged, its wood was blackened by rot, and a single lantern flickered weakly in one of the windows. Lena's face paled. "Someone's home?" Mark shook his head. "No way. That place looks abandoned." But the door creaked open just a little, as if inviting them in. The 3 exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Travis said, "Let's just check it out. Maybe there's a phone, or at least some shelter." As they approached, the forest grew quiet, too quiet. The sound of the fire faded behind them. Even their footsteps seemed muffled. When Travis reached for the doorknob, Lena grabbed his arm. "Do you hear that?" He stopped. Inside the cabin there was music, a faint lullaby, scratchy and warped, like it was playing from an old record that had been spinning for decades. He pushed the door open. The smell hit them first. Mold, old wood, something metallic beneath it all. The cabin was small, one room, dust swirling in the light of a flickering oil lamp. There was a table, a rocking chair, a cold fireplace, and on the table sat a gramophone, the needle moving in circles over a cracked vinyl record. The music stopped the moment they entered. Travis called out, "Hello?" No answer. Lena stepped inside, her boots creaking on the floorboards. "There's no one here." Then she saw something carved into the wall beside the fireplace. "Don't stay after the song." Her stomach tightened. "Guys, we should leave." Mark laughed nervously. "It's just some old hunter's joke." But before they could turn back, the door slammed shut behind them. They spun around. Travis lunged for the handle. It wouldn't budge. Then, from the gramophone, the record began to spin again. Only this time it wasn't music. It was breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing that filled the room. The lamp flickered, then went out. The only light came from the sliver of moonlight bleeding through the window. Something moved in the corner. Lena felt it before she saw it, the shift in the air, the soft shuffle of feet. A shadow detached from the wall, too tall, too thin, moving with jerks and twitches. "Who's there?" Travis shouted. The breathing grew louder, closer. Then a voice, low and broken, whispered, "You came back." The three of them backed toward the table. The shape stepped into the pale light, a man or what had once been one. His face was bloated and gray, his eyes milky and sunken. His clothes clung to his skin like they'd never dried. Mark gagged. "Jesus Christ." The figure tilted its head, lips curling. "You stayed too long last time," Travis stammered. "What are you talking about?" The figure's grin widened. "You always come back. You always forget." And with that, the record scratched again, and the air seemed to collapse in on itself. The walls pulsed, dark stains spreading outward like veins. The cabin groaned. From above, footsteps creaked, though there was no second floor. Lena screamed as hands, cold, wet, clawed, reached from beneath the floorboards, gripping her ankles. Travis yanked her free, kicking the boards loose, revealing not dirt beneath, but faces. Pale, eyeless faces pressed against the wood, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. Mark was already at the door, slamming his shoulder into it. It cracked open an inch. The shadow lunged. It moved impossibly fast, dragging across the floor like smoke. It hit Travis first, knocking him to the ground. He gasped, eyes wide, and then his mouth opened, and another voice came out. "You should have left when the song stopped." Lena and Mark tore the door open and ran into the night. The fog had thickened so much they could barely see their hands. Behind them the cabin moaned, the light in its window pulsing like a heartbeat. Then the music started again, soft, slow, the same lullaby, echoing through the trees. Lena turned back just once and froze. Travis stood in the doorway, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. The figure was gone, but his eyes were glowing faintly, reflecting the light of the lantern. He smiled. "It's warm inside. You'll catch cold." She ran. They didn't stop until dawn, when the fog finally lifted. But when they turned back, the cabin was gone. In its place was a clearing full of dead grass. No sign of walls, no door, no table. Except one thing remained, an old gramophone half buried in the dirt, the needle still spinning in silence. Lena reached for it, trembling. The base was carved with words so faint she almost missed them. "You always come back." Mark didn't make it out of those woods. They searched for days, but he was never found. A week later, Lena woke up in her apartment to a sound she hadn't heard since that night. A soft, slow knock. 3 times. She turned toward her window, heart pounding, but no one was there. Then, faintly, from the other side of the glass, she heard the whisper, "You forgot to say goodbye." and that was the last sound anyone heard her make. When police broke down her door the next morning, it started with a whistle that didn't belong to anyone alive. Just a low, haunting tune that cut through the mist of Coldridge Valley, a place where even the wind refused to travel after dark. Locals said it was bad luck to whistle in those woods, especially at night, especially near the river that ran black and still. They said if you did, something would whistle back, but no one believed it anymore. Not until the night Jeremy Haskins tried to prove it wrong. Jeremy was a college kid from Virginia Tech, visiting his uncle's cabin deep in the Appalachian backwoods. He'd grown up hearing stories about the Whistling Man, an old folk tale passed around like a dare. Supposedly, the man had been a miner who disappeared underground a century ago after a cave-in. People said you could still hear him walking the ridges at night, searching for the men who left him behind. Jeremy thought it was perfect Halloween content for his channel. The Whistling Man Challenge, he called it. A ghost hunting dare. He and his two friends, Cole and Eric, hiked into the valley after sunset. Fog moved through the trees in long silver ribbons. Every now and then they'd hear water dripping somewhere in the distance, but otherwise the forest was dead quiet. Jeremy had his camera rolling. "All right, guys," he whispered. "We're at Coldridge Valley, right near the old mines. Locals say if you whistle 3 times, something whistles back." Cole laughed. "Or maybe it's just the wind." "Guess we'll find out," Jeremy said. He raised his fingers to his lips and whistled. 3 short, sharp notes, then silence. They waited, grinning nervously, glancing around. Nothing. Cole shook his head. "Told you. Just a story." But then, faint and far away, came a whistle. It mimicked Jeremy's exactly 3 sharp notes. The boys froze. Eric whispered, "Tell me that was one of you." Jeremy swallowed hard. That came from the river. He pointed the flashlight toward the sound. The beam cut through fog thick enough to look solid, but beyond it, they could make out the faint shimmer of water. "Let's check it out," he said. "Are you crazy?" Cole hissed. But Jeremy was already walking. The air grew colder with each step, their breath visible, their footsteps soft on the damp leaves. The closer they got to the river, the stronger the smell of iron became, and then another whistle. This one longer, slower, almost mournful. Jeremy aimed his camera at the riverbank. The water barely moved, but there was something there, something standing knee-deep in the current, a man. He was tall, his clothes soaked, his head slightly bowed. A lantern dangled from his right hand, its flame flickering orange. The other hand hung at his side, holding what looked like an old pickaxe. Jeremy whispered, "Sir, you okay?" The man didn't move. Cole raised his flashlight. "You lost or something?" The figure slowly turned his head toward them. The light caught his face and Jeremy's stomach flipped. There was no face, only pale, stretched skin where features should have been. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth flesh and faint sunken lines where a face had once been. Then the whistle came again. But this time, it didn't come from in front of them. It came from behind. Eric spun around. "There's another one, holy." His voice cut off with a sharp gasp. Jeremy turned. A second figure stood only 10 feet away, emerging from the fog, identical to the first, featureless, soaked, holding a lantern. And then another whistle came from the left. Then another from the right. Shapes began to appear through the mist. Dozens of them, all moving slowly toward the boys, their steps in perfect rhythm, their lanterns swinging in time. "Run!" Jeremy yelled. They bolted for the trees. Branches tore at their clothes as they stumbled uphill. Behind them, the whistles rose and fell in eerie harmony, echoing through the valley like 100 voices breathing in unison. Cole tripped, falling face first into the dirt. Jeremy grabbed his arm and pulled, but Cole's eyes were wide, staring behind him. "They're right there!" he screamed. Jeremy turned and froze. The whistling men were at the edge of the clearing, motionless. But something was different now. Each of them had a mouth wide, jagged, slashed into their smooth faces, dripping dark fluid. And all at once, they smiled. The whistling stopped. Then they spoke in a single, broken voice that didn't sound human. "You took the air from us. Now we take yours." The lanterns went out. Darkness swallowed the forest. The next sound was the rustle of movement, then a strangled gasp. Jeremy's flashlight flickered on the ground, showing a boot dragging backward into the fog, a hand clawing at the leaves, and then silence. Only one man made it out. Eric. They found him 2 days later, wandering along the roadside, covered in mud, shaking, barely coherent. He kept muttering the same thing over and over. He made us whistle back. When police searched the area, they found the camera near the riverbank. The footage was mostly static, but a few seconds of video remained clear. Jeremy stood near the water, the lantern man barely visible behind him. He was whistling again, but his tone was off, higher, forced, like something was controlling his breath. Then, in the reflection of the river, another face appeared beside his, smooth and featureless, just like the others. The camera dropped into the water, and faintly, through the distortion came the sound of 3 perfect notes, echoing as if the mountains themselves were whistling along. To this day, hikers say that on cold October nights, if you walk too close to the river in Coldridge Valley, you'll hear someone whistling just beyond the trees. If you whistle back, they say you'll see lanterns moving toward you through the mist. But no matter what, don't whistle a 3rd time. The first sound that came out of that hollow valley wasn't thunder. It was a bell. One long, solemn toll that echoed through the Appalachian night like a warning from something buried too deep. The locals of Willow's Edge all heard it at the same time, around midnight, October 29th. The problem was, the church had no bell. It hadn't for almost 80 years. That old church sat alone on a ridge just above the hollow. The roof sagged. The windows were boarded and vines had swallowed most of the stone. No one went near it after sundown. Kids dared each other, but no one stayed long enough to look inside. They said if you stood too close to the door, you'd hear a second bell, one that only rang for you. Mark and his sister Dana didn't believe it. They were city kids visiting their grandmother for Halloween week, bored out of their minds and looking for something real to do. When they heard the town gossip about the self-ringing church, they decided it would make a perfect night adventure. They hiked up the hill with only a flashlight and Dana's phone recording everything. The forest was silent. No wind, no crickets, no sound at all except the crunch of their boots on the dirt road. Grandma said it used to be called St. Marrow's. Dana whispered. It burned down during some sermon in the 1930s. The priest went crazy and locked everyone inside. Mark laughed, though it sounded forced. Guess he forgot how doors work. But when the old church came into view, neither of them spoke again. The moon hung low, bleeding through broken clouds. The church's bell tower leaned to one side like a snapped neck. The door stood half open, its hinges blackened by fire. Mark raised the flashlight. Looks like nobody's been here in years. Then what's ringing? Dana asked quietly. They stepped closer. The smell hit first, soot and old wood, mixed with something sweet and rotten underneath. The floor inside was black with ash. Long pews stretched into darkness, warped and melted. Then they saw the altar. It was covered in what looked like wax drippings. Thick, yellow layers pooled across the wood like melted flesh. Dozens of candles surrounded it, still burning. Mark's voice cracked. Who lit those? Before Dana could answer, a sound rippled through the rafters. Bong, the bell, deep, heavy, shaking dust from the ceiling. Mark and Dana froze. It tolled again, slower this time, like it was breathing between strikes. Dana whispered, "It's above us." Mark aimed his light upward. The bell tower rose into darkness, the rope dangling like a vein from the ceiling. It was moving on its own, swaying back and forth, pulling against nothing. The bell rang again, louder. The air itself seemed to vibrate. Mark grabbed Dana's hand. "We need to go." They turned for the door, but it was closed. Completely sealed, as if the boards had grown back. Dana pounded her fists. "Mark, it's nailed shut." The bell rang again, and this time the floorboards beneath them shuddered. A low groan echoed from below, like something shifting under the foundation. Dust poured down. The candles flared, their flames bending toward the altar. Mark's flashlight flickered. In the flash of light, he saw something. A figure kneeling behind the altar, its back arched, head bowed. Its clothes were burned to rags, its skin gray and cracked. It was ringing something. Not a bell, but a rope of vertebrae, each bone tied together with sinew, stretched taut between its hands. Dana's voice trembled. "Mark, look!" The thing raised its head. Where a face should have been was a hollow black cavity that pulsed like lungs breathing. Inside that void, the faint glow of embers burned. Then it spoke in a voice that sounded like two stones grinding together. "Mass begins again." The bell roared. The walls shivered. Mark pulled Dana, running toward the side door, but the pews began to move, sliding together, blocking the aisle. The floor buckled as if the whole church were alive and breathing. "Out the window!" Dana screamed. They crashed through the nearest frame. Glass tore across Mark's arm, but he barely felt it. They hit the ground hard, rolled down the slope, and landed in the damp leaves below. Behind them, the bell still rang. Over and over, faster now, echoing through the hills, they ran until the light from the church was gone. Only then did they stop, gasping, their ears ringing. Mark looked back and froze. High on the ridge, the church stood perfectly still again. No fire, no bell, no light. Just silence. "Did that happen?" Dana whispered. Before Mark could answer, something heavy hit the ground beside them. The rope. The same rope from the bell tower. Blackened, wet, the vertebrae still warm. It had a knot at the end. Around it something dangled. A small silver cross burned almost black. Mark reached for it, but Dana slapped his hand away. "Don't touch it." He looked at her. "It followed us." They heard the bell one last time, soft, distant. But this time, it wasn't from the ridge, it was right behind them. They turned, and in the dim light of the moon, they saw a figure walking slowly down the hill. The same thing from the church, holding the rope, dragging it through the leaves. The bell tolled once more. Dana screamed and bolted into the trees. Mark followed, tripping over roots, branches tearing at his skin. He could hear her breath ahead, sharp and fast. Then suddenly nothing. Her footsteps stopped. "Dana!" he shouted. The forest stayed silent. He turned his flashlight in circles, searching, and saw the rope again, hanging from a branch. The silver cross swung slowly at eye level. He ran. By dawn he reached the edge of town, collapsing at his grandmother's porch. When the sheriff's deputies went back to St. Marrow's, they found nothing. No footprints, no candles, no rope. Just cold ash and silence. But the sheriff later admitted something he didn't tell Mark. When they opened the church doors, the bell tolled once, and on the altar sat 2 candles. One burned all the way down, the other was still lit. That same night, Mark's grandmother woke up to the sound of a bell ringing outside her window. Soft, steady, and far too close. When she looked out, the sound came from underground. Not like a cave echo, not like a river, but like something alive, breathing. That's what drew Travis and his 2 friends up to Black Hollow that night. They had been told stories their entire lives. Stories about the hollow that breathes once every October. Locals said if you were close enough to feel it, your lungs would start to move in sync with it. Like the hollow itself was trying to make you part of it. They thought it was a joke, until the ground really started to move. It began with a single gust that rose from the soil, carrying a deep, moist warmth, like air coming from something's throat. Then silence. Then again, the ground flexed, leaves rattled, and the air pulsed outward. Travis laughed at first. It's probably air pockets under the mountain. But his friend Jason crouched low, pressing a hand to the dirt. This isn't air, it's pressure, like something pushing from below. From below what? Travis asked. Jason's flashlight beam shook across the clearing. The hollow stretched before them like a sunken scar in the forest floor. Trees curved around it in a perfect circle, all of them dead, their bark peeled off like skin stripped away. The center dipped downward, ending in a deep pit where the moonlight refused to touch. They stood at the edge, staring down. The ground breathed again. This time, it came with a sound. A wet, sucking gasp that made their ears ring. The wind stopped. Even the insects went quiet. Tell me that's not real. Their third friend, Mason, whispered. Jason took a few steps closer, his flashlight trembling. If it's a vent, we'll see steam or something. But there was no steam. No smoke. Just darkness so thick it felt solid. Then something inside the hollow exhaled. The trees bent back. Dirt sprayed upward. And the smell hit them. A mix of rot, metal, and something sour, like blood left out in the heat. Mason gagged. Jesus, what is that? Travis's heart pounded. He felt the ground throb under his boots. Every pulse matched the rhythm of his own chest. Slow, heavy, dragging him down. Let's go, he said quietly. But Jason didn't move. His light caught something near the bottom of the hollow. A shape. Wait, there's something down there. Jason, don't, Travis snapped. We're leaving. Jason didn't listen. He started sliding down the edge, dirt crumbling beneath his feet. The flashlight beam danced over twisted roots and rocks. Mason shouted after him, but Jason just waved them off. He reached the center, crouching near what looked like a patch of skin, stretched, torn, covered in dirt. He brushed at it with his glove. The ground moved, it twitched under his hand, and then it blinked. A single massive eye opened beneath the soil, lidless, pale, the size of a dinner plate. The pupil dilated instantly at the light. Jason screamed. The hollow exhaled again, violently. The force threw Jason backward, slamming him against the rocks. Travis and Mason stumbled as a low rumble rose from below, like something massive shifting beneath them. Travis grabbed Mason's arm. Run! They barely made it 3 steps before the ground split open. A deep fissure ripped across the clearing, splitting the soil like tearing flesh. From inside came the sound of hundreds of voices whispering all at once. Jason's screams echoed from below. Jason! Travis shouted, leaning toward the pit. There was movement, a flash of Jason's light, and then he was gone, dragged downward by something unseen. The earth sealed shut with a sickening crunch. Mason fell to his knees, shaking. He's gone, oh God, he's gone. The hollow inhaled, Leaves swirled toward the center. Rocks tumbled inward. The trees groaned, leaning closer. It was like the entire forest was being pulled toward that spot. Travis pulled Mason up. "We need to get out now." They ran through the woods, branches snapping, the ground pulsing beneath them. The sound followed, a low, rhythmic breathing that made their chests ache. Every inhale seemed to drag the air out of their lungs. Every exhale pushed it back in. By the time they reached the road, Mason collapsed, gasping for air. His skin was pale, veins showing dark under his neck. "Travis, I can't breathe right." Travis looked in horror. Mason's chest rose and fell, not on its own, but in perfect rhythm with the sound still echoing through the trees. He pressed a hand against Mason's ribs. The skin was warm, too warm. Then he felt it. A pulse, not from Mason's heart, but from deep inside his chest, like something beneath his lungs was moving on its own. Mason screamed. He clawed at his chest, blood bubbling from his lips. His ribs flexed outward, not breaking but bending. The sound of the hollow breathing grew louder, closer. Travis stumbled backward, shouting Mason's name. But Mason fell silent, eyes wide open, chest still rising and falling in sync with the forest. Then he stopped breathing. The woods went still. Travis stood frozen. Then slowly Mason's body twitched, once, twice, and a deep exhale came from his open mouth. It wasn't his breath. It was the hollows Travis ran. He didn't stop until he reached his truck parked near the edge of town. He locked the doors, shaking, trying to convince himself it was all in his head. But when he started the engine, the radio turned on by itself. Static at first. Then a low voice whispering between the noise. "You were supposed to stay." He turned it off, but the static came again, louder this time, the voice rising between the cracks of sound. "We are still breathing with you." Travis slammed the gas pedal, tires spitting gravel. But the sound followed, from beneath the truck, from inside the air vents, even from the rumble of the road. By the time he reached his house, the breathing had stopped. He didn't sleep that night, but around 3 a.m., he heard it again. Soft. Slow. Coming from the crawl space under the floor, he grabbed a flashlight and crouched near the vent. The sound was louder there, unmistakable. Something was breathing beneath the house. He whispered to himself, "It followed me." The vent rattled. The boards creaked, and then a single whisper came through the cracks. "You left us hungry." The flashlight flickered. The floor beneath him shifted, just slightly. A pulse, a heartbeat. Travis ran out the front door, barefoot into the cold night. He didn't stop running until he reached the sheriff's office. When they returned to his house the next morning, everything looked normal. But when they opened the crawl space, the air smelled like rot and wet soil, and there were fingerprints in the dirt, deep, human ones reaching upward. No one ever found Jason or Mason. But every October, locals say you can hear the hollow breathe again. And sometimes, if you stand close enough, you'll hear something else beneath the sound. 3 voices whispering in the dark. Still breathing. Still waiting. Still hungry. The sheriff who helped Travis that night retired the following year. Before he left, he told one final story in the local diner about how he went back to the hollow at dawn. He said it was quiet. Still. But when he laid his hand on the ground, it exhaled. He swore he heard a heartbeat underneath, and as he walked away, he realized the air wasn't just moving around him. It was breathing with him, matching his rhythm step by step. Travis left Appalachia the same week. He never came back. But every year in late October, someone reports the same thing. A hollow that moves, trees that bend like lungs, and whispers that rise with the wind. The forest still breathes, and it remembers every breath it ever took. If you made it this far, tell me, would you dare to visit Black Hollow this October night? Or would you listen to it breathe from afar? Because some places in Appalachia don't just live, they wait.